Ernie, there is no question that the Grey Cup Festival and the Grey Cup game is the greatest single sports attraction in our country.
And now the coach of these victorious Ottawa Rough Riders, who's trying his very best to not smile too much.
Don, I was just talking to Dave Fleming after he caught that touchdown pass, and he said that Saskatchewan defense has so much respect for Garney Henley.
Hi, everyone. Well, here at Canadian National Exhibition Stadium, our crews have been busy since early morning making final checks on all of the facilities.
Thank you very much, Brad. And she's starting to quiet down a little bit here at the CNE as the 62 Grey Cup becomes history.
How about that, Ernie? And this camera is going to follow all the reaction for you. Injuries that may occur this cold day here at McMahon Stadium.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pat Marsden. And this afternoon, I have the great pleasure and honor of being your host for this 1971 Grey Cup Classic.
And as promised, 7 that have called games on CBC join me. Bill Stevenson called the 55 game in Vancouver. Edmonton beat Montreal. Bill, semi-retired, lives in Toronto, longtime sports director at CFRB Radio. One of the great swimming and figure skating commentators. He did 3 Grey Cups. Ted Reynolds in 56, 57, and 59. Nothing changes, does it? Ted's retired and lives in Victoria.
I do not. I live in West Vancouver.
Truly unique is Bob Moir, who did a couple of games as a commentator, many more as a producer. Bob lives in both Toronto and Florida, is retired as a consultant to the International Skating Union. Don Whitman has done the most. 19 games, 61, 64, 74, 75, 81 through 95. You name it, he does it or has done it. The Olympics, curling, hockey, triathlon. Johnny Esaw single-handedly built CTV Sports starting in the 60s. He did 8 games, 62 the Fog Bowl, 65 through 73. John is retired and lives in Florida. The Dean, Don Chevrier, started in 69. He did 9 games, 71 through 73, 76 through 80. Don also lives in Florida, works for ABC Radio, will do curling for NBC in Salt Lake City. And we have saved the quietest member for last. Longtime voice of CTV, 13 games, 74 through 86, back in the days when the network split them. Pat Marsden is in Tampa, Florida, returning to Toronto, where he is co-host of the popular morning show on the Fan 590.
And I apologize for not having my red jacket on, but unfortunately I had to get it cleaned after 17 years.
Some of the jackets we can bring those orange jackets back. Let me begin with Bill Stevenson. You called the game in 1955. You're a young radio announcer on the West Coast. Talk to us about coming to this new medium.
Well, I had done a few games for CBC throughout the prairies that year. That's the first time they did television as far as football was concerned in the West. And when I did the first Grey Cup game in the West, and the first one ever televised, it was against the Big Four. We had the 5 points for the touchdown, 1 point.
5 points for a touchdown?
5 points for a touchdown. It was the Big Four we were playing against. As you remind me, it was the WIFU. I used to think it was the Western Conference, but it was the WIFU. But I think that the great thing about that game was there were only 3 cameras. Now you're going to have, what, 23 or 24 out here. So 3 cameras. We've
got 4 cameras in the studio.
The replays were very good, as a matter of fact, they gave us. And we had no color man. There was no color man in those days. Just Steve Douglas, the late Steve Douglas, who was CBC Toronto, and myself in Vancouver at the time. And we did the game between the two of us, quarter by quarter, and it was one of the great games, I think, because you had Sam Echeverry, over 500 yards passing, and you had Jackie Parker playing both ways, safety and quarterback, over 400 yards running.
Now, you mentioned no color commentators. Don, was it you that was telling me you wanted to be color commentator and not play-by-play guy because you got more money? Is this how it worked?
In the early 60s,
That figures.
Yeah, in the early 60s, Bob and I would alternate. He would do play-by-play one game, and I would do the color commentary, and we'd reverse the role for the next game. And we always wanted to be the color commentator because we threw the commercial cues, and in those days, when we weren't being paid much money, we got extra revenue for throwing the commercial cues. So you always wanted to be the color commentator.
Ted, let me ask you, you're well known, you're a legend in swimming and figure skating. You do 3, 4 Grey Cups, as you say. What is it that's special about calling football?
Well, I think it's the Canadian thing. I really do. I get fed up, you know, with people saying, oh, the CFL. I notice that still it draws the biggest audience of any sports event every year, outdoing the Stanley Cup final. I believe that's correct, is it not?
Right.
And I think that is We don't have a great deal now that's uniquely Canadian, but we do still have the CFL, and the ultimate is the Grey Cup game. I think it's just, you sort of feel good about it.
Well, it's uniquely Canadian to compromise. Pat, remember back to when CTV did a half, CBC did a half.
That's what I like best about it. You got the full salary for doing half the
No,
game.
but what you liked was Marsden used to do the first half, and I can remember him saying to me one day, I hope this game is 50-0 at the half.
Of course. I mean, you're out there competing. But as I say, the greatest thing was you could come to Montreal or Toronto or wherever it was, have a terrific time, and know that you'd only have to work half the game.
He'd be on Crescent Street before the second.
Don, talk to me. We're going to talk about favorite moments. John, I want to talk to you about the Fog Bowl, but Chevy, talk to me about some of the offbeat moments, the strange things that happened.
Well, one of the strange things from a broadcaster's point of view happened right here in '69 at the Autostad. Russ Jackson's last game. That's when Ronnie Stewart ran for over 240 yards, didn't get the MVP, which in those days included a car. Russ Jackson got it, offered to drive him around a little bit, but didn't work out. But after the opening kickoff, Tom McKee was in the sidelines. And Don Southern came running over after the kickoff to him, and he said, "Quick, give me the belt off your pants." He said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Mine's broken. Hurry up, the huddle's starting. Give me the belt off your pants." So Southern wore Tom McKee's belt throughout the entire 1969 Grey Cup game.
Still has it.
So here's Tom with the mic in one hand trying to hold his pants up with the other. Not the first reporter to be caught with his pants down, but in a Grey Cup game, maybe the first.
Johnny, you called the '62 Fog Bowl game. Some specific memories of it.
Well, that hurts when I think of the '62 game, because I had sold the Grey Cup game to ABC for 1962 and 1963.
Was that Kirk Gowdy when he came up that year? Jim McKay or
Jim McKay and Paul Whitman.
Right.
And by Wednesday, the fog was rolling in, so I had a meeting with Jake Goddard and Roone Arledge, and I said, this thing could continue. We better do something to get it ready. We don't want to blow this thing. So I said to Jake, I said, well, I can put together 2.5 hours of highlights of the season so that if they are stuck, they can roll part of it or cut in and out of it. And then the game came on, and the fog was down and down and down. Well, Stuke and I were guessing. We had a pretty good idea of what they were doing. Jim McKay eventually said, I can't do a game up here. He ran down to the field, and with a microphone, he's running up and down the sidelines, trying to guess who was doing what. And Paul Whitman was upstairs, and every once in a while, the fog would lift, and he'd say, describe it, and then he's gone.
It's funny, you know, Brian, I talked to Jim a couple of weeks ago out in Salt Lake. He remembered the game, and I recalled his line, the great line. He said, at the end of the Sunday game, it's all over the last 9 minutes, 29 seconds, Jim McKay said, ladies and gentlemen, you just watched the first and only serialized football game in the history of the sport.
Now, of course, Marsden was just commenting when John was talking about the fog, and Marsden says, not the first time Esaw worked in a fog when he couldn't see the field. Bob,
or his successor.
Or his successor. Bob, you've been both a producer and a commentator. I imagine much harder to be on the air, a lot more talent required.
Absolutely.
I don't think so. I don't. That was it. No, the toughest thing about being a producer was that you had to talk to the commentators.
Now, you had no trouble.
And quite often,
well, they were listening anyway.
they didn't listen. No, really, that was.
There are other problems in being a producer, because when I was the executive producer of it and doing the game as well, I used to go early for our practices. And then I'd keep looking to see as Marsden showed up, as Mike Wadsworth showed up.
And that was the third quarter when you were
Wadsworth would show up, and then sneak in.
No, John was the greatest executive producer. You'd hear an airplane go, and CP was the sponsor. Well, look at that beautiful Canadian Pacific airline. They're probably having old port cigars as they sit and enjoy a Labatt Blue. I mean, it was unbelievable. He could get them all in 20 seconds.
You know, Brian, Bill was talking about the small little crew, 3 cameras. I think in '56, I think we'd gone to 4 cameras. But nowadays, right around, there's more people in this working for the CBC in this studio than we used to have in the entire production unit. We had
none of whom were alive when you were doing it.
The first game I did, George Retzlaff was the CBC producer, but he was off in Australia for about 6 months. So a guy called Will Hayden
I want to understand this. He's the football producer, but he goes to
Well, he went down for the Melbourne Olympics, but he wouldn't fly, so he had to go by ship, so he was away half the year. But we had the executive producer was a fellow called Jack McCabe, who never went to an event at all. He stayed home or someplace. And he was very much like Marsden in some respects.
What respects would that be?
We had one producer-director, one script assistant, one PA. I think there was somebody down on the field to do something. And in the booth, there'd be Steve and myself and another. One time it was Larry O'Brien, but one game, 57 game, which was the last one at Varsity Stadium, Bing Whitaker got himself into it. And Bing at that time was 6'4", maybe 320.
50.
And the booth, I mean, it was crowded with 3 people, but now we put Whitaker in. And Douglas and I are sitting there sort of like this for the whole game. And one time we had to hold our own microphones. I don't think you guys do that nowadays, hold your own microphone.
No, we held our own microphones. We also had a situation, nobody on the field.
No.
We had Bill Herbert, who was supposedly our color man. First time he'd been in the football stadium, I think, the late Bill Herbert, who was a great broadcaster. But, and Anna Stukas was doing some of the halftime. And he was doing, as a matter of fact, with Hal Walker, who was the late sports editor of the Toronto Telegram.
Yeah. The guys on the field were great in those days because they bring people in from radio, you see. I'll never forget. I think Chevy was.
Come from?
I think radio. I think because there was no television. I think Chevy was doing this game and went down to Bill Good on the sidelines. And Bill started doing an interview, but he didn't have a microphone.
I remember a great story about Ernie Afaganis at Old Empire Stadium in Vancouver. Typically wet Vancouver night in the fall. In one hand he's got his microphone, on the other hand he's got the umbrella. Yeah. And to get ready to go on the air, he puts them both down, straightens his hair, picks them up, the microphone wound up in his back pocket, he signed on holding his umbrella handle.
Stay with us. We will continue with the 7 survivors that have called Grey Cup games on CBC. We take a break, and you are a survivor indeed. We'll return to Montreal after this. And back at Montreal's Olympic Stadium. Speaking of Olympic Stadium, Pat, let me begin with you. You got any memories from games in this facility?
Well, I'm still mad about a call that was made during the 1981 Grey Cup game when my Ottawa Rough Riders, I was impartial when I did these games, but in 1981, the Rough Riders were 21-point underdogs.
I remember the game.
They had no chance of winning. They had a kid by the name of J.C. Watts, who's liable to be the president of the United States in the not-too-distant future. He was their quarterback, and they had the great Tony Gabriel. Now, Ottawa finds themselves up by a 21-0 score. They're 21-point underdogs, and they throw a pass to Tony Gabriel in the 4th period. The game is tied at that point. But Ottawa, this is their final shot at really winning it. And Tony makes a sensational catch, despite the fact that he could barely run. And a flag comes down. He's called for interference. The defensive back is called for interference. They're both called for interference. That's when I said, I got to get out of this game.
Speaking of calls, Don, was it you that worked the game with a streaker?
1975 in Calgary, a bitterly cold day.
You were the streaker.
And just prior to kickoff, the security guard comes up into the press box. I was working with Frank Rigney and said, there's a woman downstairs has an important message for you. And I said, well, send her up. So this woman comes up with an envelope, and hands me this envelope, and she said, could you put this on the air during the telecast? So I said, okay, goodbye. She leaves. I open the envelope, and it's, I forget what it said, but streaking for God downtown. I thought, okay, throw it on the floor. The national anthem starts, and all of a sudden this nude woman starts running through the band and through the players. And Frank Rigney said, that's the same woman who was just up in the press box. And I grabbed the envelope off the floor and I look at it. Her name is Nadia Whitman. And Rigney said, it's a good thing her name's spelt a little differently than yours. Now the sequel to the story takes place. Chevy is down at field level, doing the sideline
I was
reports.
freezing. It was a terribly cold day, as you say, Whit, and I was standing next to Johnny Rogers as she literally flashed by. And Johnny said, "Man, in this weather, that guy's got to be crazy." I said, "Johnny, that's not a guy."
But Brian, one of my favorite stories, you asked Pat about a story here in Montreal. This isn't a Grey Cup story. It's a regular season game. Ron Lancaster, Leo Cahill, and I did games for about 10 years together. But in this particular occasion, Ronnie was out west, and Leo and I were working here in Olympic Stadium. And there are about 2 minutes left in the half, and Leo takes off his headset and walks out of the booth. With about a minute left in the half, our director, Ron Harrison, comes on the intercom, and he said, "Whit, where's Leo? I haven't heard him for the last minute." I went on the talk back, and I said, "I don't know." Half ends, I throw the commercial cube. Who comes walking into the booth, munching on a hot dog, drinking a Coke but Leo? I said, "Where did you go?" He said, "If you wait till half time, there's too big a line."
John Esaw, let me ask you. Today, everything is by air. Talk to me about the days of train travel.
Well, in 1951, which was the first Grey Cup that I televised, or radio, there was no television in those days, but the Saskatchewan Roughriders had not been in the Grey Cup for 17 years. Prior to that, they were in for 6 years, 5 out of 6 years, and lost every game. But now in 1951, they were so excited that 2 full train loads of fans loaded up, borrowed money from Household Finance, my sponsor.
There he goes, Pat. You got it in again, didn't you, John?
Never borrow needlessly unless you must. Now, remember the slogan.
Are you getting residuals from HFC?
Yeah, they're still coming in. 2 full train loads all the way, 3 days down, a little tired doing the game, 3 days on the way back, and so you had to have a little drink now and then, just to keep you going. But the train ride was tougher than doing the game, or even playing the
Pat
game.
working for you in those days.
But you know what? That was the first Grey Cup that I attended. I could bring you to the seat. You haven't mentioned that Ottawa won that game
Oh,
yet.
yeah, won it.
Okay.
What was that, 21-11?
21-14.
21-14.
Well, now, who are you trying to impress?
And Glenn Dobbs
Right.
put on a kicking exhibition that day that's never been seen since.
Yeah, well, who was the quarterback for Ottawa?
Tom O'Malley.
Absolutely, John. Way to go.
And for Saskatchewan?
Dobbs kicked.
Glenn Dobbs.
Yeah.
Dobbs kicked 2 right out of the park,
That's right.
and then he kicked 3 more, but they didn't go as
They wanted to change the name of Regina to Dauberville.
They did.
Yeah, they did.
The license plate said
Yeah.
so.
You know, the first televised game was, of course, 52, 3 cameras, total rights, $7,500. Seat only, I believe, in Toronto. I was a kid, literally not even a teenager, living in Edmonton, and I bugged my mother to death to get a television set because great new technology. The Air Force was flying the kinescope out to Edmonton for play the same night.
Really?
And we're sitting up at midnight, and the station is flashing updates. The plane is circling the airport. The plane has landed. Expected to air at 1:15. It was remarkable in those days.
Whit, you were talking about Leo Cahill. Now, Leo, outside of his broadcasting, in my mind, is one of the great salesmen the CFL has ever had.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, the Toronto Argonauts are playing in BC, Empire Stadium, and Leon McQuay fumbles that ball down near the goal line. He was going over for what would have been the winning touchdown. Leo went berserk. And I think he claims to this day
Well,
got robbed by the officials.
his
His knee was on the ground when he fumbled.
His great line was
Argos have been paying for that play ever since.
his great line was Leon fumbled and I fell because he got fired.
That's right.
Who did that game? It was Calgary-Toronto. Did you do it,
It
Don?
was 1971.
71? Did I do it?
I think I did. I'm not sure, but I was there, I know. I recall
Yeah, I was there too. I
what
can't
McQuay was quoted as saying as the reporters surrounded him in the locker room after the Argo disaster. He said, "Hey guys, what's the fuss? It's only another football game."
He's the guy that was always late for the bus, as you know.
He was with Pat.
Bob Moir.
But you know the big play in that game was not so much that Leon fumbled and the Argos lost the ball. Remember, it was at Harry Aboff who
Yes.
kicked the ball out of bounds, and as a result, the ball turned over.
And Argos never had a
Argos
chance.
never had a chance.
By the way, guys, the commentators in 71, Chevy and John Esaw, I'm told.
Oh.
Glad you guys remember the games you did.
Whit was there, I promise. He was
Yeah, I was on the
Let
sidelines.
me ask Bob Moir. the enormity of putting this together. I mean, you were there as a play-by-play announcer. You were there so many years as a producer. I think people at home, look and they figure this thing just happens. Talk to me about the preparation, the weeks, the months, and what went on in the weeks of the...
used to come in on Tuesday and have it all ready at Saturday.
On Wednesday morning, always. No, but I'll tell you, the biggest change we made in the time that I was doing football was we moved the cameras from center field, 55-yard line, out to the 25-yard lines so that we could get a picture of the field that could explain to everybody why the Canadian game was as good as the American game.
Before that, there were 3 cameras all. You might as well have had one.
Right beside.
And there were no end-zone cameras.
Bob also
Are there too many,
introduced 3
too
people
many
in the
cameras
booth.
now? Are we too many cameras now in covering football, do you think?
Not for an ordinary game. There's too many cameras for one of these games. But
Bob also
an ordinary
introduced
game.
three people in the booth when he brought Leo Cahill and Ron Lancaster in with me.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't know.
Did you do the 63 game on television in Vancouver, Chevy?
No, that's before my time. No.
Did it?
I didn't start till 68.
I did 61 was my first Grey Cup game, and that was the only Grey Cup overtime game in history.
Who did
Right,
63?
and Kenny Plain ran the outside.
But who set up the opportunity? Jerry James. Remember the great run that Jerry James made to get 6 yards to set it up?
Wasn't that the year that
Do you know who did the 63 game? Mike
Mosca
Dennis.
put the head on Willie
Well,
Fleming?
listen to this. Mike Dennis. You're right. Brad Keane with Hugh McPherson and Frank
And
Anderson.
guess who did radio that year?
Ted Reynolds.
Yeah.
Now, who was...
I was supposed to do that game, but I got a call from the president of BCTV, who called my boss, John Bassett, who said, "You will not do this game. Brad Keane will do the game, so step back." And
you didn't overrule him?
I never
And you weren't about to argue with John.
I never wanted to fight with John Bassett, so I let him go ahead.
But you know that famous incident with Mosca and Willie? I was doing the game on radio and I didn't even see it. And it was after the game somebody said, "God, that was awful." I said, "What was awful?" He said, "Mosca almost killed Willie," and I didn't even see it.
Well, Bob may agree or not, but I really think that the game he did in 58, I was not broadcasting and I was young, starting in the business watching.
You were 30 years old.
35-28, Winnipeg and Hamilton. Jim Trimble and Bud Grant were the coaches. I think that was the greatest Grey Cup game ever, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Up until 1989.
That was great. Toronto, yeah.
There are a lot of great ones.
I'm going to tell you something. 1954 was a great game
it was.
because Edmonton had no chance to win.
That's exactly right.
Everybody said, I mean, this is going to be an annihilation. Montreal's got Sam Echeverry,
And
and
they got
they've
Hal
got
Patterson.
Hal Patterson. And you know what? They didn't win that year. They didn't win in 55, and they didn't win in
And I tell you,
56.
Pat, if you look at the stats for the 56 game and see what Jackie did, he played quarterback, he played halfback, he caught passes, he
ran
threw
back
passes,
kickoffs.
he ran back kickoffs, he ran back punts, he played defensive back. He and Kenny Plain were two of the fine defensive backfielders in the game.
That's right.
There's
So that was-
guys out here now, of course,
Perhaps
they're going to
54 was the most dramatic turnaround. The controversial, was it a fumble or a lateral? Hunsinger, Parker, the return, the shocker, the 26-25 upset. That was
But you know, 55,
like
remember?
a lot of our commentators here, the Americans who came up and played football usually stayed in the country.
55, didn't Robert?
some-
Okay, I'm going to move back. You know that?
Let me answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
Immigration's tighter now in the U.S.
Robertson owned Montreal. What was his name? Owned Montreal in 55 when they played Edmonton. The big rumor was he put such a big bet on it that he had to sell the Alouettes.
No.
Who was the owner?
Ted Workman?
No.
This was before-
1955.
John, you'd remember this
Fellow
guy.
was in the
Then he
stock
moved to
business.
Toronto and he was going to have a dog track there and everything. A great guy. great guy, loved to drink and gamble. He's actually my idol.
We could stay a lot longer. We have to wrap it up.
We're not wrapping this up, Brian, I'll tell you. We've come a long way to be here.
They came all the way from Florida. Some of us
You
live
know
in
what?
Canada.
Now I get sympathy for Moir as a producer. Pat, let me begin with you. Why do you guys, why is there a rekindling of the love for this game in this country? I mean, ratings are down, but it still outdraws the Stanley Cup final. Begin
Well,
with you,
I'll tell
Pat.
From my
what
point
is
of
special
view,
about it?
I grew up in Ottawa, and the biggest thing going was Ottawa, the Rough Riders. And we went there as kids. We never had to rely on television because there was none, and we went to every game. Then the CFL put in that very restrictive television situation where they cut out Toronto when Hamilton or the Argonauts were playing, lost an entire
What
generation.
happens to it now? Don, can it survive?
Oh, I think so. But, further to what Pat was saying, back in the 60s, there were 2 pro teams in Canada other than the CFL teams, the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there was no competition for the professional entertainment dollar, and I think that was a big factor. And of course, as far as the NHL goes in Western Canada, that didn't happen until 1979. So I think there were some changes, except for Vancouver.
But the press was responsible for a lot of this phony NFL is coming to Canada. NFL is coming to Canada. Pete Rozelle told me many times they would never, ever come to Canada. Tagliabue says they would never, ever come to Canada.
You're right, John.
And people lost interest in the Toronto Argonauts because of that, and then that spread.
And your station was responsible in Toronto. So many of the games, the Argos could go for 6 weeks with never being seen on television.
Let me get
a
quick couple of final words, Bill.
Let me say right now that the greatest single sporting event ever is the Grey Cup. And it still will be. In this country, absolutely. And that's why the CFL can really come back. It may not be great in Toronto, so those who live in Toronto, like myself, get that feeling. But in the rest of Canada, especially in the prairies, it is still huge. And look at what's happened in Montreal. And I think Ottawa is going to be a huge success, as a matter of fact, getting back into the CFL too. And look at all of us. The greatest thing that's ever happened to us was, I think, we look in our memories, doing a Grey Cup telecast.
The greatest thing that ever happened was the fact that we are no longer on the air. Because really, when we were on the air, people used to go to the games so they wouldn't have to watch us. Now they can stay home because...
And a great donation, thanks you.
With that, let me thank Pat Marsden, Don Chevrier, Johnny Esaw, Don Whitman, Bob Moir, Ted Reynolds, and Bill Stevenson. Stay with us. We'll continue from Montreal right after this.